Picture a room, nothing fancy, rough-hewn logs for walls, the gaps packed tight with grey-green moss and smeared over with clay that cracks every autumn and has to be resmeared before first frost, or you'll spend December watching your breath. A floor of beaten earth so old and so compressed by foot traffic that it's practically stone, dark from a century of accumulated spilled fat and ash and the simple pressure of people living. A ceiling low enough that a tall person has to angle their neck at a degree their skeleton was not designed for, which is why most people in this era end up with a specific cervical curvature that modern archaeologists can identify in skeletal remains and note in their field reports with the same tone you'd use to describe a persistent minor plumbing issue. Now fill that room with people, not a few people, not a family of 4 sharing a 3-bedroom apartment the way some of you grew up doing, the kind of situation where your biggest complaint was that your sibling borrowed your things without asking. 28 people, 2 generations, sometimes 3. Grandparents, parents, adult children, teenage children, children who are still small enough to be carried, a young couple who married in the summer and are navigating the specific social challenge of intimacy with 26 witnesses, an orphaned nephew taken in out of kin obligation, an old widow from the dead husband's side whose claim on the household is thin but whose age makes refusing her impossible. Add a cow, 2 goats, a pig that is being kept for breeding purposes rather than for the table, 14 chickens. That's not a barn you're imagining. That's a home. That's the home of most people in medieval Kievan Rus, approximately the territory of modern Ukraine, Belarus and the western regions of Russia, for 6 months of every year, when the outside cold is cold enough to kill you in your sleep without the combined warmth of everything breathing that you can get into one space. And here is the thing that is hardest to absorb, living in the time and place that you live. This was not considered deprivation. This was not an emergency. This was not a temporary situation that people hoped to improve as soon as circumstances allowed. This was Tuesday. There is no word in the Old East Slavic language of this time and place that corresponds to what you and I mean when we say privacy. Not because they hadn't gotten around to inventing it yet, linguistically speaking. Not because the concept was slightly out of reach and they were working on it, but because the idea of being alone, of occupying space that belongs only to you, of being unseen and unheard and unwatched by other human beings for any sustained period of time, was so far outside the daily reality of existence that it simply had nowhere to live in the language. The closest word they had was something like tish, quiet, not alone, just quiet. That is the world we're entering tonight. Kievan Rus. Not the romanticised version of church icons and epic poems, not the princes and the golden domes and the dramatic river baptisms. The actual one. The one built out of mud and smoke and 6 months of total isolation, and 30 people around one clay oven, and the specific knowledge of exactly how every person you've ever met smells at 3 in the morning when the fire needs tending. This is an experiment in a different kind of intimacy. The intimacy of necessity. The intimacy that exists when privacy is not a luxury but a death sentence, when the warmth of the body next to you is a resource as real and as critical as grain. I make these history podcasts and honestly I have no idea what proportion of you are genuinely trying to sleep and what proportion are people who cannot sleep unless someone is explaining the social hierarchy of medieval Eastern European dirt floors to them. Both groups are valid. Both groups get what they came for. Get comfortable. Find your position. Whatever warmth you have around you, blanket, another person, a cat with strong opinions about where it wants to be, settle into it. Here we go. Your eyes open in the dark. And when I say dark, I need you to understand what that means in November of the year 1066, in the village of Stoyani, 4 days' walk northeast of the city of Kyiv, in the borderlands where the forest begins to thin and the steppe begins to breathe. There is no streetlight bleeding under a door. There is no phone display, casting a blue wash across the ceiling. There is no moon tonight. The clouds have been sitting on the village like a wet felt cap for 4 consecutive days. And even when there is a moon, almost no light gets through the single window, which is a wooden frame stretched with a piece of scraped cattle stomach, translucent enough that you can read light and dark, but not enough to see shapes. So, dark. True dark. The dark that existed before electricity was even a concept someone was working toward. The dark that your great-grandparents and their great-grandparents understood completely, and that you, if you've spent your whole life in a world with artificial light, have probably never actually experienced. For 1 or 2 seconds, your body is ahead of your brain. You're aware of warmth on your left side, weight across your legs, someone else's feet, as you'll confirm in a moment by reaching down. A particular temperature difference between the air on your face, which is cool, and the air under your blanket, which is dense with the accumulated heat of your own sleeping body. And you're aware, before you're aware of anything else, of the smell. The smell of this dark is specific, layered. It communicates before you're conscious enough to read it. First, smoke. Always smoke first. Not sharp, not alarming. This is old smoke, settled smoke. The smoke that has lived in every surface of this building for years or decades or longer. In the clay of the walls, in the wool of every blanket, in the actual structure of your hair and skin, and probably, by this point in November, in the marrow of your bones. Your nose is adjusted to it the way a person's nose adjusts to their own house. You don't smell it most of the time. You smell it now in the first moments after waking, when your senses are briefly honest before the adjustments kick in. Below the smoke, animals. The cow, her name is Zariah, which means dawn, is in her corner behind the wattle partition, and she smells the way cows smell when they've been inside since October, which is to say, present. Thick. Warm in the specific way that large herbivores are warm, which is different from the warmth of the petch, or the warmth of human bodies. The goat smells sharper, more chemical. The pig in the warmest corner adds a bass note to the whole composition that doesn't so much smell as inhabit. Below all of that, the smell that is the most present and the least acknowledged. 26 human beings who've been in this room since the river closed, including you. You've been here since April. You stopped consciously registering your own smell somewhere around midsummer. What you haven't stopped registering is the particular compound of everyone else's, the way each person in this room contributes their specific thread to the whole, and the way you've learned to read those threads in your sleep, the way the smell of Nastia's lye soap mixes with the fermented grain smell of the kvass vessel, and the particular sweated wool smell of Prokhor when he's been splitting firewood, and the thin, papery smell of old Jadwiga that has no name except that it's the smell of great age and long winters. This is your air. This is the air of home. A weight is pressed against your left side. That's Prokhor. He's 17, the eldest son of Stepan, the household elder. He snores with the biological commitment of a man decades older than he is, a wet, articulated snoring that your brain has long since filed under background information not requiring response, along with the creak of the log walls in high wind and the chickens repositioning on their shelf. The feet across your legs are Hritz, 12 years old, who sleeps in configurations that suggest his skeleton operates under different rules than most skeletons. Your name is Boris. You're 15 years old, nearly 16. You arrived in this household in April, 2 days after you buried your mother and 4 days after you buried your father, carrying a letter of introduction that established you as the son of the cousin of the wife of the man who now controls your life, which is a connection thin enough to be nearly theoretical, but which, in this world in 1066, is enough. Stepan, the household elder, your mother's cousin's husband, looked at you the day you arrived with the particular assessment of a man who manages resources, took in your dimensions, your approximate capacity for work, the ratio of your likely contribution to your certain cost. You'll sleep at the cold end, he said. That was the full welcome. You sleep at the cold end. But the church bell, the new church, built 2 summers ago by order of the regional boyar, and still slightly too grand for the village it serves, has just rung in the distance, not matins, not yet. Something else, a single stroke, 3 in the morning, and in the silence after it you hear something that requires attention. The fire is low, not out, not gone, but lower than it should be at this hour, and through the crack at the Petch's door a glow that should be orange is edging toward amber, and there is a thread of cold air that has no business being in the air of this room. This is your fault. This is your responsibility. The fire is your job. You get up. Let me tell you about the floor, because the floor is everything. The floor of this izba, of almost every izba in Kievan Rus in this period, is one of the most socially complex objects you've never thought about. It looks like a dirt floor. From outside, from distance, from the perspective of a historian looking at archaeological reports, it is a dirt floor. But inside, to the people who live on it, it is a map. A precise, unwritten, absolutely enforced map of exactly who each person in this household is and what they are worth, and how much of the collective warmth they have earned the right to. Closest to the Petch, the great clay oven in the northeast corner is where Stepan sleeps. The Bolshak, the household elder, the man who decides things, who controls the grain stores, who negotiates with the boyar's steward and settles internal disputes and determines the allocation of work and food. He is 53 years old. He has a face like old bark, dark and layered and weathered by the particular abrasion of decades of difficult decisions. His hands are enormous, calloused, capable looking even in sleep. He has been in this house for 30 years. He has earned the warmest position with 30 years of being the structure around which everything else is organized. To his right, his wife, Nastya. This is not sentiment. Nastya's position slightly closer to the Petch on the east side reflects the fact that Nastya is, in the interior economy of this household, the actual authority. The grain stores under the floor are her domain. The allocation of food, the management of the loom's output, the organization of the women's work through winter. This is Nastya's empire, managed with a precision that Stepan's outdoor authority couldn't approximate. The warmth is hers in both the literal and the metaphorical sense. At the corner nearest the Petch, on a low wooden bench that nobody else sits on because it's understood to be hers, old Jadwiga, Stepan's mother. She's 70, or near enough. She can't lie flat because of what lives in her chest, something that closes her airways when she's horizontal, that makes her cough in a way that fills the room with its effort. So she sleeps sitting up, in segments of an hour or so, and she is often awake in the night when everyone else is not, her eyes catching the pesh glow like a cat's. You have never once seen her actually asleep. This unsettles you more than you'd like to admit. Radiating outward from the petch, in decreasing order of warmth, Stepan's married son Mykola, 22, and his wife Darina, 19, who is pregnant. A fact that has been quietly shifting Darina's position northward for 2 months, Nastya negotiating the spatial politics without discussion, moving things incrementally, the way water moves. Mykola doesn't notice. Darina notices everything. She says nothing. Then Prokhor, 17. Then Hannah, the oldest daughter, 16. Then the younger children in order of age, Vasilko, 14. Oksana, 10. Makita, 7. Ending with the 2 smallest on the Polati, the sleeping shells built into the wall above the petch, where the air rises and collects in its warmest form. Children on the Polati, not adults. Despite being the warmest position, the Polati are socially low. For the same reason the best view from the balcony still puts you in the cheap seats. Inconvenient. You can't get to the floor without waking people. Children fall off. Old Jadwiga can't manage the climb. Then, Nastya's sister Oksana Starsha, elder Oksana, to distinguish her from the 10-year-old, who came 3 years ago after her husband drowned. Her children, Serhiy, 13, and Marinka, 11. A young couple, Fedir and Uliana, married in summer, in a corner that has by wordless collective agreement been given slightly more birth than everyone else. Not much. Maybe 18 additional inches on the south side. This is not luxury. This is acknowledgement. The household needs Fedir and Uliana to produce children. The household has decided to offer them the absolute minimum approximation of privacy that collective survival allows. Nobody speaks of this. Everyone enforces it, every night, by sleeping in positions slightly more turned away from that corner than they might otherwise choose. And then, at the south end, nearest the door, you, Boris, the cold end. The cold end is not uniformly cold. This is not a refrigerator with a temperature gradient. It's 4 or 5 degrees colder than the north end on a bad night. In the absolute context of this room, 4 or 5 degrees is a measurable, real, socially meaningful difference. It is the difference between uncomfortable and less uncomfortable. In a household where comfort is measured in gradations from genuinely warm to surviving, those degrees are a statement. You arrived in April. You have, in 7 months, moved 3 feet north from where Stepan placed you. 3 feet. You have earned 3 feet of warmth through 7 months of water carrying and fire tending and leather scraping and general demonstration that you intend to remain, that you contribute, that you are not a cost but an investment. 3 feet north is not nothing. 3 feet north, in this language, is a declaration of belonging. You pick your way across the sleeping bodies with the practiced care of someone who has done this 50 times in the dark and learned the cost of error. The floor is occupied in a pattern that changes only slightly from night to night. The bodies of people who live together closely enough find their positions and return to them with the reliability of tide. You know where Ritz's feet are before your foot lands near them. You know the exact position of Oksana Starsha's outstretched arm, the angle of Serhiy's legs. The cold of the floor through your foot wrappings is a specific cold. Clay cold, mineral and dense, different from the cold of the air. You've wrapped your feet in the dark by feel, the rough wool wraps that live tucked under the edge of your blanket. Slightly less cold than the floor, and which you wrap from ankle to toe in the sequence you've done now so many times, your hands don't need your eyes. The Petch's door is a low arch. You push it open, birchwood board, fired clay smooth on the interior, and look in. The embers are orange, not grey, not dead. Orange, but reduced. The fire having settled deeper into itself than it should have by this hour. Something failed. Maybe you didn't feed it enough before sleeping. Maybe the venting is slightly off. Maybe the birch round you put in last wasn't as dry as it looked. It doesn't matter what the cause was. The cause is the past. The task is now. You take the breathing stick, a long iron rod, worn smooth at the grip from years of this exact purpose, and stir the embers slowly, clockwise. Your wrist has learned the pressure, not aggressive, not timid. Enough movement to introduce oxygen without throwing ash into the room's air, which would drift to sleeping faces and wake people, which is worse than a low fire by most measures. You stir. The embers respond. A brightening, a shift from amber toward orange, a small restructuring of the fire's geometry. You hold the stick still and watch. This is the part that took longest to learn, the watching. The patience is waiting for the fire to tell you what it needs before you assume you know. Stepan's fire philosophy, if he'd ever articulated it, would probably be something like, listen before you act. He hasn't articulated it. You've learned it by watching him at the peach the few times he's done it himself. The embers settle into a higher burn. Now, the small fuel. You take birch twigs from the stack. You split them yourself yesterday, reducing arm-thick pieces to finger-thick pieces with a hatchet. The rhythm of it something your shoulders know entirely without thought now, and lay them against the coals at a low angle. Not stacked, leaning. Air needs to circulate. You wait. 3 minutes. 4. The smallest twigs catch. A small bright point, then a line, then a modest flame that has the quality of intention about it. The fire deciding to participate. Now the medium wood, then a proper round. You close the door most of the way, a hand's width gap. The fire breathes. You can feel the heat changing. Not the emergency of a cold oven starting, but the gradual assertion of warmth returning to the room. From her bench, old Jadwiga speaks. Good, she says. One word. She's watching you with her night watch eyes, the petch glow turning the wrinkles of her face into a landscape of orange and shadow. She has been watching you 10 fires for 7 months. She knows the difference between good fire tending and adequate fire tending. She doesn't offer this distinction unless you're on the wrong side of it. Good means the other thing. You nod. Sit on the low stool that belongs to no one except whoever needs to be near the petch. The warmth comes to you in pulses, finding your hands first, your cold hands, the knuckles of which have been dry and slightly cracked since October, and then the back of your neck, and then somewhere deeper. The warmth that goes into the bones and finds the specific cold that lives there after a winter night. This is your 30 minutes. The fire-tending 30 minutes, which belongs to no category that this household would name. Not work, not rest, not prayer, but which is, in every practical sense, the closest thing you have to time alone. Around you, 26 people breathing, the cow, the petch, old Jadwiga watching, wind along the eaves, nothing requiring anything from you, just the fire and the warmth, and the particular quality of a room that is performing sleep around you. You sit until your eyes go heavy, then you check the fire once more. Good, settled. Eat in the birch round with patience, and pick your way back to the south end. Procor has expanded into your space. This is constant. This is as reliable as gravity. Sleeping humans in cold rooms expand toward warmth with the relentlessness of a physical process. You fold yourself into the remaining area, pull the blanket up to your chin, tuck your feet under its edge. The cold end is slightly warmer than when you left it. The fire is doing its work. You close your eyes. Old Jadwiga makes a small sound. Not language, just presence. You sleep. Dawn comes in November the way a reluctant person comes to a conversation they've been avoiding. Slowly, incompletely, communicating mostly through implication rather than directness. The window, the stretched cattle stomach window, shifts from black to dark grey to a lighter grey that has the quality of trying. It takes 2 hours, the November dawn. In summer, the world simply decides to be light. In November, it considers its options. By the time the grey is genuine, Nastya is already up. She is always first. She has been first. Oksana Stasha has mentioned to you in passing for 23 years. She rises without announcement, without the drama of waking. No groaning, no stretching, no transitional period of half-consciousness. She simply exists lying down, and then exists standing, the coat of sleep taken off as efficiently as any other garment. She goes to the petch, opens the door, assesses the fire. Your fire. Her face, reading the fire you tended, does not change. She doesn't nod. She doesn't make the sound she makes when the fire has been neglected, a sound somewhere between disappointment and contempt, located in the throat, lasting less than half a second and communicating entirely without ambiguity. And so you know from your blanket before you're even properly awake that your night's work was adequate. In this household, the absence of the disapproval sound is its own form of praise. Nastya pushes more wood into the pitch, opens the vents on the clay top, begins the morning escalation. Within 15 minutes, the heat output doubles and the room responds. Bodies shift toward consciousness. The chickens overhead begin their morning revision of the night's roosting decisions. Zoria the cow repositions with the sound of several 100 kilograms of animal deciding to face a different direction. The morning basin. This is the first social event of the day, and it operates with the precision of ritual, even though it has never been explicitly organized. The basin, a shallow wooden bowl slightly cracked on the left side, repaired twice with birch tar pitch, sits on the shelf near the door. The water in it was carried yesterday. By this morning it's cold in a way that cold water becomes in an enclosed winter space, which is a particular settled cold, still and heavy. Nastya washes first, then Stepan, then old Jadwiga, who has to be helped from her bench with Nastya's hand under her elbow, a transfer of weight so practiced it looks effortless. Then Mikola, then Davrine. Nastya monitors the water level carefully when Davrina's turn comes, making sure enough remains. Then the older children in sequence, then the younger ones, then you. By the time the basin reaches you, the water is grey. Whatever trace of transparency it had when Nastya lifted it this morning has been redistributed among 24 previous uses. It's cold and slightly particulate, and there's almost enough of it to properly wet your hands and splash your face. You do this. The cold is a shock every morning. Your skin has not adapted. Your nerves have not habituated to it. Cold water on your face at 5:30 in the morning in November is cold water on your face 100% of the time, without exception, until the end of your days. Then, kasha, buckwheat today, which you know before Nastya has measured a single grain. because buckwheat has a colour and a smell that announces itself. The iron pot goes onto the peach's cooking surface, a flat ledge built into the clay for this purpose. Water in, grain in, salt from the clay pot on the shelf, 2 pinches, measured with the automatic accuracy of a hand that has done this particular measurement approximately 1,000 times. And then the waiting. The petch doesn't hurry. The petch has never hurried. The petch is a 2-ton clay object that operates on its own understanding of time, which is thermal and patient and entirely indifferent to any schedule that exists in the minds of the people around it. The kasha will be ready when it's ready. You've learned this. The whole household operates according to petch time, which is the slowest and most democratic time because it governs everyone equally. While the kasha cooks, the house performs its mourning. The youngest children descend from the paladi, Makita first, careful on the wall pegs, his tongue between his teeth with concentration, Oksana behind him in a drop that Nastya intercepts without looking. Small children and Polati follow the same physics at every hour. Vasilka and Hritz, 14 and 12, are already in some form of contest conducted in whispers too low to pass. Nastya doesn't look at them. She doesn't need to look at them. Her awareness of her household's interior weather is environmental, not optical. Stepan sits near his warm position by the petch, doing the thing he does every morning, present but not yet fully engaged, receiving the day's information before deciding what to do with it. He looks like a man waiting for the world to explain itself. Fedir is already up and has taken the water bucket out to refill. This is his contribution to the morning, claimed quickly and quietly as a way of demonstrating continued usefulness. Uliana, still wrapped in blankets, watches him go with the expression of someone recalibrating expectations in a marriage that is 5 months old. Old Jadwiga watches everything from her bench. The kasha smell builds, nutty, slightly sweet, with something underneath it that is the smell of grain-eating heat, of dry becoming soft, of winter food doing its essential work. Your stomach responds with undignified immediacy. You haven't eaten since last evening. You won't eat until the bowl reaches you, which is not a long wait, but which feels longer when the smell has been in the room for 20 minutes. When the bowl comes to you, it's full. Not full. Nastya's fulls are calibrated, not generous, but full enough. The kasha is thick, slightly salted, still hot from the pot. You eat standing, because the seating in the morning is allocated the same way as the floor at night, and your position doesn't yet include the right to one of the 3 stools. You're working on it. After breakfast, work. November work is interior work. The fields are frozen solid under whatever snow has fallen and compacted and refrozen into the layered archaeology of early winter. The harvest is stored. The outdoor processing, threshing, winnowing, the sorting of grain by type and quality is finished. What remains for the long months is the making. Cloth, rope, leather, tool maintenance, structural repairs to the building. Your work is leather, not skilled leather work, not cobbling or fine harness making, or the kind of detailed work that earns a craftsman a reputation and a price. You do the preliminary work, cleaning hides, stretching them on wooden frames, scraping with a draw knife to remove the fat and membrane on the inner surface. It's cold work. Cold because you're in the section of the izba closest to the door, which has the best light through the window but the worst warmth. It's smelly work. The hides come from the autumn slaughter, from the cattle and pigs whose lives ended in October, in the practical and unsentimental transaction that every winter requires. and some of them have been in various stages of processing long enough to develop a depth of smell that has its own internal geography. The smell of a curing hide, first sharp, a bright chemical smell, ammonia and organic acids, then deepening into something denser, earthier, a smell that's not pleasant by most standards, but that your nose has learned to stop registering after about 20 minutes. Your nose has become very competent at this kind of strategic withdrawal. By the end of a morning's work, you have no idea how you smell to anyone else, which is probably useful. Your tool is a draw knife, iron with 2 wooden handles, curved blade, edge keen enough to catch light. The handle wood is worn smooth in the specific places where hands have gripped it for years, years of other hands before yours, the wear shaped by the accumulated labour of whatever apprentices and household members have done this work before you arrived. You hold it with both hands, pull it toward you along the hide's inner surface, and the membrane comes away in grey-white ribbons. Catch, pull, release. The resistance is constant. Too much angle and you cut through. Too little and you skim without catching. The right angle is a physical memory now, stored in your wrists and shoulders, retrieved without thought. Beside you, Serhiy, Oksana Stasha's son, 13 years old. He's working on an older hide. Cow, thick, the grain tougher to work through. He's strong but impatient, which is the wrong combination for this task. You're pressing with your whole arm, you tell him. I'm trying to get it off. It'll come off. Use the wrist. The work is in the wrist. He modifies by about 8%. It's something. Better, you say, which is a slight overstatement but an accurate direction. This is how knowledge moves in this household, in this world, in this time. Not from books. There are no books here. The nearest books are in Kiev's monasteries, and they're in Church Slavonic, which is nobody's spoken language. Not from explanations or theories, from watching, from proximity, from the 18 months it will take Serhiy before his wrist learns what your wrist knows, from the patient accumulation of corrected errors. Your left shoulder knows the draw knife, your right wrist knows it. Your palms, calloused now in the specific places where the handles sit, know it. This is what it means to learn something with your body. It lives in your body, not in your mind, and your mind is only in the conversation when something goes wrong. The morning of leatherwork passes in the rhythm of the tool and the occasional low exchange. Outside you can hear the wind picking up. Inside, the rhythm of the loom, Nastya and Darina weaving, the shuttle's wooden clack filling the room like a slow heartbeat. The loom stands between the petch and the window, where the light is best and the warmth is second best. It's a vertical loom, tall enough to nearly touch the ceiling beams, strung with the warp threads of whatever cloth is being made. Rough linen this month, for household use, though later in the winter they'll shift to the finer work that will go to the spring market. Nastya works it with the automaticity of someone doing a thing she has done every winter of her adult life. Darina is learning. Her movements are slightly more deliberate, slightly more considered, with a quality of ongoing concentration that Nastya's don't have. The difference between doing a thing and having done it long enough to stop doing it, having it simply happen through you. This is visible in the two of them working together at the loom. This is what mastery looks like from the outside. Oksana Stasha spins near the east wall, the spindle dropping and twisting between her fingers, the thread growing between them in continuous thin rope. Spinning is the one task in this household that can be done while doing other things. She spins while tracking the two youngest children's territorial negotiations, while listening to Nastya's conversation with Darina, while monitoring the sounds from the men's side of the room that might indicate something needing attention. She's simultaneously in 3 places at once. She's been doing this for 40 years. The morning, the smell of leather and wood smoke and kasha residue and wool and animals. The light through the window, pale and flat and unhurried. The work. Here is a thing that the historical record tends to understate. Nastya runs this house. Not because Stepan is weak. He isn't. Not because this society is secretly matriarchal. It isn't. But because the division of authority in a household like this one is more complete and more real than the simple hierarchy of men over women suggests. Stepan's authority is exterior. The fields, the negotiations with the boyar's steward, the village assembly, the trading decisions, the relationships between this household and the other 15 households of Stoyany. Everything that happens outside these walls belongs to Stepan. Everything inside belongs to Nastya. And inside is where everyone lives, for 6 months of the year, completely. The food allocation, Nastya. The grain stores, Nastya. The cloth production, Nastya. The medical knowledge, which is not medicine in any systematic sense but the accumulated understanding of what works, which herbs address which conditions, when a fever needs cooling and when it needs warmth, how a pregnancy is progressing and what it might need, Nastya. The arbitration of interior disputes, Nastya. The determination of who has earned what within the domestic hierarchy, Nastya. Stepan decides whether to trade with the merchant from the Eastern Trading Post. Nastya decides whether the household can afford what Stepan plans to trade for. These are not the same authority. Both are real. You learn this in October when the question of winter food allocation comes up. Stepan announces the plan, the daily portions, the meal schedule, the designated days for meat versus grain. He announces it with the authority of a man who has made this decision. The next morning, Nastya adjusts 3 items without saying anything to Stepan. The adjustment is small and specific and reflects a calculation that Stepan's virgin didn't make. The goat's milk yield will drop by this much by February, which affects the children's portions by this much, which requires this much additional reserve in the storage pit, which means reducing the salt pork allocation slightly earlier in the season than Stepan planned. She tells this to Darina while they're at the loom. She doesn't tell Stepan. Stepan eats the slightly adjusted meal and does not notice the adjustment. Darina looks at Nastya. Nastya looks at the loom. The shuttle passes. The household's actual winter plan, the one that will carry 26 people through to April, is Nastya's. You know this because you are 6 feet from everything, and everything is audible, and this world has no walls between people except the walls that people agree to pretend are there. You go out for water at midday. The cold outside is a different register from the cold of the izba. Inside there are 26 bodies plus animals plus the petch. The temperature is uncomfortable but livable. Your system is calibrated to it, set its internal standard accordingly. Outside is uncalibrated. Outside is November in Kievan Rus without any of the mitigating factors. The village of Stoyany, 16 homesteads arranged along a track that is technically a road, in that it goes places and has been going the same places for several generations, and that distinguishes itself from the surrounding ground mainly by being more thoroughly compressed. The track runs roughly north-south. Northward, the headman's house, the church. Southward, the river. The river is the seam, a tributary of the Desna, which is a tributary of the Dnieper, which runs all the way to Kyiv, 4 days from here by foot, 2 days by boat in summer, more in high water, and beyond Kyiv to the Black Sea, and beyond the Black Sea to Constantinople, which is the largest city in the known world, and which people speak of here the way people speak of places that are real but theoretical. You've never been to Kyiv. You've barely been anywhere. Your entire life has occurred within about 3 days' walking distance of where you're standing now. This doesn't feel like limitation exactly, it just is. The shape of the world is the shape you've been given. The path to the well. Frozen mud. There's a specific physics to frozen mud that fresh mud and true ice don't share. It's irregular underfoot. Each footstep a separate small negotiation with the surface. You've learned to walk it with slightly bent knees, your weight distributed, the iron spike that now lives in your coat pocket available for the sections near the well where the freezing is complete and the surface is glass. The well is at the village centre, where the track widens and there's room for 3 people to approach at once. This morning just you and Marinka, who is here for her household, and who is 11 and not particularly interested in conversation. You nod. She nods. The well cover comes off with 3 strikes of your palm in the place where the ice is thinnest. The rope is a cold rope. The bucket descends. Deep earth water in November, cold in the specific way of things that haven't experienced a temperature gradient in months. Not ice cold, dense cold, the cold of continuity. You fill the bucket, hook it to your arm, and stand for a moment. The sky is doing what it's been doing for 3 days, considering snow, low, flat, the colour of river ice, with an intention to it that the people of this region read like text. Everyone here reads sky. It's among the first things you learn. The sky tells you things, if you know how to look at it. Things about what's coming, about how much time you have, about the kind of cold that's approaching. This sky says, soon. The geese from Mikita Chorney's house across the track are picking at the frozen ground near his fence line, jabbing at it with the optimistic determination of geese who have not yet accepted that the season for ground picking is over. They're not wrong to try. They're just early in their grief. You pick up the bucket and walk back. Once a month in winter, Father Pavlo comes. He's the priest from a village 4 kilometres to the north. There isn't a dedicated priest for Stoyani. Not yet. The village is too small and too recently Christian to support one. Father Pavlo travels his circuit. 3 villages, 1 month repeating. He conducts the Mass at the new wooden church on Sundays when he's in residence. And when he's not in residence, the villagers are technically expected to conduct a simplified form of the service themselves, which in practice means someone reads aloud from the text the father left, in the church Slavonic that nobody in the room understands, while everyone faces east and tries to approximate the appropriate spiritual posture. Christianity is new here, not so new that it's foreign. Kievan Rus was baptized officially under Prince Vladimir in 988, nearly 80 years ago. There are people alive in the village who are baptized as adults in those early years of conversion. There are people who remember their parents describing the old religion with a specificity that memory only reserves for things that mattered. Old Jadwiga remembers. She doesn't say this. She doesn't say much of anything, most of the time, that could be characterized as an opinion about theological matters. But there are moments, small, specific moments that you'd only notice if you were paying the kind of attention that proximity forces, where she does something that isn't Christianity. A particular gesture before the fire, a specific way of addressing the cow before a difficult night, a habit with water, and the threshold of the door that she doesn't name and that no one asks about. Father Pavlo is a practical man. He's 50, round, with a particular combination of warmth and weariness that develops in men who spend their lives simultaneously caring about people and finding people exhausting. He conducts the Mass in his formal manner. He hears confessions. He performs the baptisms and last rites that mark the household's entries and exits, and he asks only the minimum number of questions that allow him to feel he's attending to the spiritual condition of his flock without requiring the flock to make changes that might be difficult. He comes in December, a week before the solstice. He is fed. Nastya produces a special meal, which represents an allocation decision she's made and not discussed with anyone. And he sits near the petch with Stepan, and they talk about things that are being discussed in Kyiv, the political situation, the relationship between the various princes, news that travels down the river routes and arrives here approximately 2 months after occurring. You sit within hearing range and listen. In 1066, Kievan Rus is not a unified state in any modern sense. It's a collection of principalities connected by shared religion, shared trade routes, shared language, and shared descent from a dynasty called the Rurikids, who are currently doing what dynasties frequently do, which is disagree about who has the right to what. There are princes in Kyiv, in Chernihiv, in Pereyaslav. The relationship between these princes is complicated in ways that don't directly affect your life, but that determine things like what taxes the boyar demands, which army you might be called to serve in if it came to that, and whether the trade routes stay open. Father Pavlo speaks of these things with the careful neutrality of a man who has to live in the world regardless of who wins. Stepan listens with the careful neutrality of a man who makes decisions based on what actually happens in this village, rather than on what's happening in Kyiv. You listen with the open attention of someone who doesn't yet have enough information to filter. The priest, leaving, pauses by the door. He surveys the room, 26 people, animals, the compound smell, the life of a household winter, with an expression that has something layered in it. God is with you, he says, which is the formula. And with you, Father, says Stepan, which is the response. Old Jadwiga from her bench says nothing. She watches him leave. Her expression is one you've been trying to read since April. It's not irreverence. It's not devotion. It's something older than either. Saturday, once a week, the banya. The banya is a small log structure behind the main izba, 8 feet by 10 feet, containing a stone stove, river stones piled in a clay hearth, wooden benches at 2 heights, and nothing else. It's been here longer than the izba. Its logs are darker, the wood more deeply seasoned, and its smell, even unheated, is distinct. Old smoke and old steam and the specific mineral quality of stones that have been heated and cooled thousands of times. The banya is the one space, the single space in your existence that offers anything approximating what you don't have a word for. In practical terms, you're almost never alone in it. Bathing happens in shifts for practical reasons. Wood is expensive and fire takes time. But there are gaps between shifts. And sometimes, if your timing is right, and if Prokhor goes directly from the banya to the tavern equivalent gathering place at Mikita Chornes and forgets to come back for the post-bathing conversation he sometimes wants to have, you get 15 minutes. 15 minutes in a space you don't share. This is not a small thing. This is an enormous thing. This is, in the economy of your daily life, a luxury of such scale that you spend parts of Thursday and Friday anticipating it. The banya has been heating since mid-morning. You can smell it before you go outside. Birch smoke from its particular chimney, different from the izba's petch smoke in a way that is hard to articulate, but that your nose has catalogued precisely. Lighter, slightly sweeter, with a sharp edge that means the stones are hot. The women and children go first. Nastya, Darina, Oksana, Stasha, Hannah, Oksana, and Mikita. They go in, the door closes, a satisfying solid sound, the sound of a boundary, and for 45 minutes the banya belongs to them. You can hear, faintly from inside the izba, the hiss of water hitting hot stones, then the rush of steam, then a long settling quiet. They come back changed. This is the best word for it. Changed. Nastya, whose efficiency is normally seamless and slightly frightening, has a looseness in her shoulders. Darina moves more slowly, more carefully, with the particular ease of someone whose body has just been treated with unexpected kindness. Even the children, even Mikita, who argues about everything, are subdued in a way that isn't tired. It's the specific quiet of the body fully attended to. The men and older boys go next. Stepan, Mikola, Prokor, Vasilko, Fedia, you. Old Mikita Chorny from across the track, who uses this banya by a reciprocal arrangement predating your arrival. The banya in the first seconds is a wall. Not warmth, a wall. The air is at a temperature that your lungs, arriving from November outside, refuse as a first response. You breathe through your nose, short and shallow. Your skin, which has been managing the cold of the izba, registers the banya heat as pain before it registers it as warmth. This lasts about 30 seconds. Then the pain phase ends. Then the warmth. You sit on the middle bench. The upper bench is hottest, the lower cooler, and you've calibrated your position over the autumn, and the heat enters you with a thoroughness that the pek never quite manages. The petch heats the air around you, the banya heats you. The distinction is important. It finds your muscles, your joints, the specific cold that has been living behind your left shoulder since you started carrying the water bucket every day, and it loosens them one by one with the patience of something that has time. Stepan pours the ladle. The water hits the stones, a specific stone that he aims for, top right, which he's determined over decades of Saturday banyas to produce the best steam, and the explosion of heat is immediate. The temperature jumps. Your skin tells you it's too much. Your body overrides this assessment within 2 or 3 breaths. The birch switches come out. Bundles of young birch twigs soaked in hot water until they're pliable, tied at the handle. You've seen this coming. Prokor takes yours and begins. The switch, thwack, hits your back with a sound that is worse than the sensation it produces. The sensation is bright, specific, a line of heat that blooms into something that is not pain. Your skin, which has been covered in wool since October, receives this the way a frozen river receives the first real warmth of March. Not gently, not gradually, but all at once. You thwack Prokor in return. He makes a sound. You make the sound back. This is the banya language, largely pre-verbal, highly effective. Then the others begin to leave. Mikita Chorny first, then Stepan, then Fedia, then Vasilko. Prokor pauses, says something to Mikola about something at the far end of the village, and goes out. And then 15 minutes. The heat fading slightly at the banya's margins. The stones ticking as they release their absorbed energy. The specific quality of steam settler after the last ladle pour. Hanging in the air like something with weight. You sit on the middle bench, and nothing requires you. Nobody is breathing next to you. Nobody is sleeping, waking, requiring, negotiating. The sounds of the village exist outside but are muffled, reduced to a general ambient presence that doesn't make demands. You look at the low ceiling, which is black with seasons of smoke, the grain of the wood readable through the darkening. You breathe. Just breathe. Not for any purpose. Your skin feels new. Your shoulder doesn't hurt. You're warm all the way through, not just on the surface, warm in the specific thorough way that only the banya produces, and in the warmth you feel something in your chest ease that you didn't know you'd been holding. Mikita Chorny puts his head back in for his foot wrappings, which he forgot. You hand them to him. He goes. You sit for 2 more minutes. Then you get up and go back to the izba, and the cold outside hits you like a reminder. But the warmth is still there, under your skin, carried back inside with you. There's a thing about communal living that doesn't show up in the theoretical descriptions of it. You become an extremely accurate reader of the people around you, not because you're gifted with particular insight, because proximity is information, because when you sleep 6 inches from someone for 100 nights in a row, you learn their baseline the way you learn the baseline of the pitch. What's normal, what's slightly off, what's a cause for attention. This is how you know, 3 days before the vetcher's called, that something is being decided. Stepan's demeanour changes slightly. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone would catalogue who wasn't paying close attention. But you are paying close attention, because paying close attention is the most useful thing you can do in a household where everything important is assumed rather than stated. His conversations with Nastya go a few minutes longer than usual. He sits near old Jadwiga in the evenings and talks to her in the low, specific tone he uses when he's working something out rather than reporting something decided. Nastya moves to the storage pit twice in one morning, which he usually does once. When the headman, Mikita Vasilenko, 57 years old, headman for 20 years, the kind of man who carries authority the way the Pesh carries heat, as a physical quality rather than a performance. When he sends Serhiy around to the other households with the message that there will be a gathering, you already know roughly what it's about. The grain, the winter allocation versus the actual stores versus the weather-dependent calculation of how long winter will be this year. The vetch happens in the open space in front of the headman's house, outside, in November. This is tradition, and it is also a deterrent. It keeps the gathering from going longer than people can stand the cold. A vetch that ends when bodies can no longer endure the temperature is a vetch with natural term limits. The men of each household come. You stand behind Stepan and Prokhor with Vasilko beside you. This is your second vetchi. Your first was in September, this summer account meeting, a ritual of the same form but different stakes. This one has heavier stakes. Mikita Vasilenko speaks from memory. His, specifically, which holds the entire village's agricultural situation in precise detail, because nothing is written down, because everything important has to live in someone's head, and his is the head appointed for it. The situation. This year's harvest was average. Average in a year with a normal winter length means probably fine. Average with a long winter means trouble in March. Trouble in March means buying from the boyar's stores at prices that extract a payment the household hasn't planned for. The headman has a formula for a community reserve, a percentage from each household's stores held centrally, available by decision of the headman in genuine emergency. The argument against Andrei Koval, the blacksmith, large and certain, whose position is that his household is disciplined and shouldn't be made to absorb risk from households that are less so. He says this without naming anyone. The village knows who he means. The argument for an older man, Fedya Petrenko, who has seen 2 genuinely bad winters and who argues from that experience with the authority of someone who knows the other side of the calculation firsthand. Stepan speaks once. He has a formula for the contribution, proportional to household size, adjusted for age of members, with a specific review date in February. He says it clearly, without flourish, with the quality of a man reporting a decision he's already made rather than proposing an idea. Stepan did talk to Mikita Vasilenko beforehand. You know this because you've been paying attention to the texture of his movements for 3 days. The vote, which is a physical thing, a reading of where bodies are standing when the speaking is done, goes for the pooling. Andrei Koval's face does the thing faces do when they've lost an argument they were certain they wouldn't lose. The goat issue takes longer, it always does. Walking back in the first snow, the snow that starts during the Vesh's closing remarks, small and businesslike, the first real snow of the year, Prokhor says, "You knew it was about grain before we went." I knew Nastya had been to the storage pit twice in one morning. He looks at you. Something moves in his expression. You pay a lot of attention, he says. I don't have much else. A longer look this time. Not unfriendly. Evaluating. That's useful, he says. Not to you exactly. More to himself. The snow comes harder. You walk with your heads down and your coats pulled close. After the snow, after the Vesh, after the specific winter decision that the peach's temperature can no longer be maintained efficiently without additional heat sources. The animals. The cow, Zoria, has been behind the wattle partition since October. That was stage 1, the early autumn phase, a partial measure. Now, as the first real freeze sets in, the freeze that stays rather than the freeze that retreats, the rest of the animals move inside. The 2 goats from the outbuilding, 1 breeding pig. The chickens, who were already on their shelf, are now formally winter residents rather than overnight guests. The goats take the south corner, in the space that has been cleared and rebedded with straw. The pig takes the warm corner near the petch, which is the warmest position available to anything that is not old Jadwiga, and which the pig occupies with a serene confidence suggesting it has always known this was its due. Vasilka and you spend a morning reorganizing, moving stored materials, finding new homes for things that had previously lived in the space now occupied by goats, navigating the logic of an already full space becoming fuller. The izba, which had 17 square feet per person before the animals, has approximately 12. And the smell. Let me try to be accurate about the smell. Before the animals fully moved in, wood smoke, 26 humans in winter, leather working materials fermenting kvass, dried mushrooms, tallow candles at evening. This was the baseline. You'd adjusted to this baseline weeks ago. Now, add a cow that eats hay and whose primary metabolic output includes processes that produce gases that are, individually, not pleasant and collectively, as part of a sealed winter room, present. The cow smell is actually one of the more manageable additions. Grassy, warm, faintly barn-like, something that has an outdoor quality to it, even indoors, because it comes from an animal whose whole life is oriented toward grass and sky. Zoraya's corner, if you're being honest, doesn't smell much worse than it did last week. The goats are different. Goats smell with intention. There's a specificity to goat smell, something sharp, something slightly ammoniacal, something that announces itself with the conviction of a creature that doesn't apologize for its existence. The pig is the pig. All of this combines with everything that was already there. The result is not describable as a single smell. It's an atmospheric condition. It's the specific weather of enclosed winter living. The way winter itself is not a single phenomenon, but a collection of conditions. Cold, dark, confined, close. Your nose spends about 4 days recalibrating. After 4 days, this is the air. This is simply the air of where you live. There will come a time, later, much later, in a life you can't yet see, where this specific combination of smells will hit you from somewhere unexpected, carried on a winter draft, and it will put you back here instantly and completely. Not the idea of here, the floor, the warmth, the breathing, the 26 people, the animals, the petch. The body keeps what the mind lets go. The sleeping arrangement adjusts to accommodate the new geography. This adjustment is accomplished, as all sleeping floor adjustments are accomplished, through the slow gravitational negotiation of many bodies over the course of several nights, each person finding the position the new layout allows and settling into it. By the end of the first week with animals inside, you have moved 1.5 feet north. Goat displacement, 1.5 feet of warmth, accepted. 2 weeks into December, and the temperature does something different. Previous cold had been cold. Cold with the character of absence, the absence of warmth, the absence of sun, the absence of the things that summer offers. This new cold is different. It's cold with presence. It arrives in the night with the quality of something that has made a decision. The river. Zoria has been restless for 4 days. This isn't dramatic. Not pouring, not distressed. Just a subtle restlessness. A repositioning every few hours. A low sound that is neither distress nor content, but something in between. You've been checking her each evening, your hand along her flank, watching for the specific signs of illness versus the signs of something else. River's going to close, Procor says, watching you with the cow. How does the cow know? He gives you the look. Not contempt, just mild surprise at the question. She was born near the river. She knows. You don't argue. By the end of November, you've learned the distinction between arguing with Procor's knowledge and questioning it. The first is usually a mistake. The second sometimes produces useful information. That night, the temperature drops with intention. You know it when you step outside to check the firewood. The air hits your face with the structured cold of something serious. Not the cold of absence, but the cold of presence, crystalline, having weight, carrying itself like an announcement. The stars are very bright. Very bright means no cloud, means the heat that the earth gathered during the day is radiating straight up with nothing to catch it, and by morning the temperature will have dropped 15 degrees from where it is now. You stand in the dark, facing north, toward where the river is, 400 paces, invisible. The village is very quiet. 16 columns of smoke rising from 16 roofs, almost straight up in the windless cold. A dog barks once, stops, you stay. Outside longer than you need to. The cold is specific and demanding and somehow important to stand in, to let be around you before you go back to the enclosed warmth of 26 other people and animals. Then you go inside. The house closes around you. Procor is asleep, old Jadwiga on her bench. Cold night, you say. Yes, she says. River soon. She makes the sound that is agreement without words. You lie down. Your spot 4 feet north of where you started. The blanket, the warmth of the bodies around you. Below the floorboards, the storage pit, the food that will carry you to spring. Measured, calculated, sufficient. Nastia's calculation. Probably enough. Probably. You close your eyes and listen to the house breathe. The light through the window is different. It's not just brighter, it's white. The specific white of snow and frozen ground reflecting a low winter sun, which reaches into the room at an angle and with an intensity that the grey days of early winter don't produce. Old Jadwiga speaks before anyone else. The river, she says, just the word. Stepan gets up without ceremony, unbars the door. A rush of cold air like a declaration. Everyone in the room shifting without waking, steps out and returns 3 minutes later. River's closed, and that is the sentence. 3 words. The sentence that means no boats until spring, no travel to the trading post, no news from Kyiv except what was already in transit when the ice formed, no strangers arriving, no one leaving and coming back in any reasonable time. The 26 of you, the 16 households of Stoyany, are what the world consists of for the next 4 to 6 months. This is not an emergency. This is winter. This is just what winter is. You sit up in your blanket in the white morning light and feel something settle in you that doesn't have a name in your language or in mine. A weight distributing itself through your body, finding your bones, making an announcement. This floor, these people, this oven for the next 5 months. And the feeling, which is not dread, not quite fear, not quite peace, is the feeling of the door closing on the world outside and the world inside beginning. You get up to tend the fire. Winter in a closed house with 26 people is not the thing you'd have predicted from outside. You'd have predicted miserable, crowded. You'd have predicted the specific misery of never having space, of sleeping badly, of the constant noise and smell and requirement of other people. You'd have predicted conflict. With 26 people in a space this size for this long, with these stakes, food, warmth, the fundamental questions of survival, you'd have predicted that it would be a test of endurance, something you wait to be over. Some of it is that, but not in the way you expected, and not for the reasons you expected. The truth of it is more complicated and more strange. Living this closely with people for this long doesn't wear away at what makes you yourself, the way you thought it would. It doesn't erode your individuality. What it does is something different. It makes you very specifically yourself, in relation to very specifically them. You are, and this is precise, Boris, who tends the fire well, who moves through the dark without waking people, whose draw knife angle is correct, who carries water every morning without being reminded, who knows when to be quiet and when to speak, and who has, since the banya conversation, been the person Prokhor talks to at 3 a.m. when the rest of the house is asleep. You are this person. You are this exact person. And this exactness is created by the specific demands of this specific situation. And without the situation, the person doesn't exist yet. This is not something old Jadwiga tells you. This is something you understand, slowly, between December and March, the way you understand most important things, without a moment of realization, without an event marking the change, just a gradual shift in how you experience the room. Let me tell you what the days are made of. Morning, fire, kasha, water, the basin going around, the work beginning, midday, leather, or rope, or whatever structural repair Stepan has identified as the day's priority. a section of the east wall where the moss packing has thinned, a problem with one of the loom's uprights, the goat enclosure's wattle needing attention. The work is always something that can be done inside by lamplight if necessary, that doesn't require sun. Afternoon, the loom's rhythm. The sound of it fills the winter, the way the peach's warmth fills the winter, as constant background, as the beat that everything else happens against. Evening, the communal meal. The evening pot gets additions that the morning kasha doesn't. Dried mushrooms, on most nights, their earthy concentrated flavour different from fresh, more intense, more like the essence of mushroom rather than the thing itself. Sometimes salt fish. On the days with pork, 2 or 3 times a week following Nastia's rotation, the whole room's mood shifts upward by something measurable. You watch this happen and you think, this is what hunger does even when it's managed, even when nobody is starving, even when everyone knows they'll eat again tomorrow. The smell of meat cooking does something to the body that is more ancient than decision. You see it in 25 other people, and you feel it in yourself. The involuntary response, the mood lifting before the food has even reached you. After the meal, old Jadwiga's stories. 3 nights a week, roughly, she tells a story. The others she sits and watches. On story nights, the quality of the room's attention changes, becomes directed rather than diffuse, the household's collective consciousness gathering itself toward one voice. Old Jadwiga's stories, a prince and a river, and a woman who is also a swan. A 3-year winter, told in detail that makes you believe she's describing something real. A merchant who bargained with a creature at crossroads and got what he asked for and nothing he wanted. Stories that aren't quite myth, and aren't quite history, and aren't quite fable, that live in the space between all 3. What does the swan know about the 3-year winter? He asked the second time she told that one. She looked at you with the specific quality of looking she gives to questions she considers worth answering. To be still, she said, to become part of the cold, not to fight it. You thought about that for the rest of January, becoming part of the cold instead of fighting it. By January you know things about the people in this room that they have not told you, and will not tell you, and in some cases do not know you know. Not because you're intrusive. You are, if anything, carefully not intrusive, but because proximity is information. Because when you sleep 6 inches from someone for 4 months, you learn their baseline the way you learn the baseline of the petch. Nastia goes to the storage pit, and you can tell, from the length of time she's down there and the quality of silence when she comes back up, whether the numbers are better or worse than she expected. January. The numbers are fine, slightly better than planned. February. She goes down on a Tuesday and is quiet for the rest of the afternoon. Darina is afraid. You know this not from what she says, but from the specific quality of her not sleeping at the small hours. The careful stillness of a person who is very much awake and would prefer not to be. The fear has a shape. It's the specific fear of what's coming in March or April. The birth, the thing that her body is going to do that her mind can't fully prepare for. You know this because you're 6 feet away for the nights when she can't sleep, and the fear is audible in the quality of the silence she maintains. Procor. Since the 3 a.m. conversation in December, Procor has talked to you 7 times in the dark, in the hours between the last person sleeping and the first person waking. Not always about the girl at the end of the village, sometimes about Stepan, sometimes about something that happened at the Veche. once about a dream he had that disturbed him. Each conversation is short. Each conversation ends with sleep. None of them are referred to in daylight. This is the banya language equivalent for speech, a space that belongs to the night hours, that doesn't carry over into the daylight version of the relationship. You've accepted this. It seems correct, somehow. The night version of these conversations is honest in a way that daylight doesn't allow for, and there are things you don't know, or only partially know, or know and know you shouldn't. The dispute between Nastya and Oksana Stasha that lives entirely in a register below speech, in the angle of their bodies when they work side by side, in the specific silence that falls when one says something the other disagrees with, in the tiny adjustments of loom management and spinning territory that encode a disagreement about something that predates your arrival by years. You don't know the content of this dispute. You know its temperature. You know when Stepan's knee is bothering him. The knee that took a bad fall 15 years ago, according to Prokhor, and that predicts weather now better than the sky. From the way he shifts his weight when he stands, and from the particular set of his jaw when he thinks nobody is watching. You know which of the children are going to be sick before they know it themselves, from the faint change in their colour and the quality of their breathing the day before the fever arrives. This is what shared floors teach, not the grand lessons of history, the specific, particular, irreducible knowledge of these exact people in this exact space. February is when the illness comes, not dramatically, not all at once, the way illness moves through a closed house in winter. Patient, systematic, working through the population with the logic of something that has time and opportunity and 26 routes of transmission. Oksana is first, the 10-year-old, not the aunt. She wakes with the particular heat that isn't petch warmth and doesn't answer to blankets. Nastya touches her forehead once, and her face does the thing it does when something requires full attention without requiring alarm. Polati, she says. Oksana doesn't argue. This tells you everything. By afternoon, Nikita, the 7-year-old. By the next morning, Vasilko. You watch it moving through the room with the specific awareness of someone who has learned to read this room's baselines. You feel it coming for you with the same certainty you felt the river closing, not with exact knowledge, but with a directness that doesn't require confirmation. Day 6. Your turn. You wake with a head that has been filled overnight with something dense. Your throat has something in it with edges. Your bones. And this is the specific complaint of fever, the thing that's different from being cold, from being tired, from any other physical state. Your bones feel wrong, like they're the wrong weight, like the connection between them and the rest of you has been slightly loosened. You get up, tend the fire, because the fire doesn't care about your bones. Nastya catches you at it. She looks at your face for 2 seconds. Her hand goes to your forehead. Her palm is rough, calloused and cool, and she leaves it there for longer than the assessment requires. You stand very still. Your place, she says. I'll see to the fire. Your place. You go back to your blanket. She tends the fire. She cooks the kesha. She manages the morning basin. She does all of this plus whatever extra falls to her because you're not available to do it. And she does it without mentioning it and without adjusting her pace to communicate effort. Old Yadviga comes and sits near you at midday. My parents, you start. Different fever, she says, directly, without preamble, as if she knew what you were going to say before you said it. Not the same kind. This kind has been here before. 3 years ago, same thing. Ran through everyone. Then it was done. How long? 5 days? 6? For everyone? It runs through. Then it's done. She reaches for something, a clay cup, already prepared, sitting beside the stool. Birch bark tea, hot, very bitter. Drink it. You drink it. It's awful. It's also hot, which is the thing your body wants, and it's something to do, which is the other thing. Old Jadwiga sits. She doesn't speak. She just sits, which is different from sitting as a coincidence of proximity. She is sitting with you, in the specific sense of choosing to be present. Your mother, she says after a while. She made this kind of tea. You look at her. Smells right, she says. I can smell what's in it without being told. She made it right. You look at the cup in your hands. The birch brown liquid, the steam rising. You knew my mother. I know the kind of person who knows how to make this tea, old Jadwiga says, which is not an answer and is completely an answer. You finish the tea. The fever runs for 7 days in you. During those 7 days, Nastya does your work without comment. Old Jadwiga sits with you in the midday quiet. Prokhor at night, in the 3 a.m. language. You'll be fine. Just that. On day 8, Nastya gets sick. She manages to stay functional through what must be a substantial act of will, continues. Her morning routine continues the allocation work, continues the monitoring of the grain stores. But she's slower. The edges of her are slightly frayed. This is the closest thing to vulnerability you've ever seen in her, and it's so slight that you'd miss it if you hadn't been in this room for 9 months. On day 9, Stepan goes horizontal. He lies on his side near the pech for 2 days without speaking, and the room, the whole room, does something it doesn't do when any other person is sick. It adjusts. It quiets. Because Stepan is the structure that the household is built around, and the structure is temporarily lying on its side, and everything is waiting to see if it will rise again. On day 11, Stepan sits up. He eats half a bowl of kasha. He tells Prokhor that the north wall repair needs to happen before the thaw makes it worse. The room exhales. You feel it, the collective exhale, as a physical thing, a shift in the air. Everyone's baseline resetting from the level of slight alarm back to winter normal, the particular vigilance that accompanies a sick household elder dissolving back into the ordinary vigilance of February. The illness is over. By March, cold has taught you things that have no translation. You know the difference between the cold of a well-fed morning and the cold of an underfed one. Not air temperature difference, but the specific way the cold feels to a body that is adequately fueled versus a body that is running slightly below. These are not the same cold. One is an absence, the other is a presence. You know the way your body generates and loses heat, the sequence of it, which parts go first, hands, which go second, ears, which surprise you by going first on particularly cold days, the back of the neck. You know how to manage this not by fighting it, but by anticipating it, by accepting the hierarchy of warmth in your own body the same way you've accepted the hierarchy of the floor. You know the cold of old log walls, the structural cold that has lived in the clay packing since the building was built, the cold that can't be driven out by any one winter's heating because it's been absorbed by years of winters, because the building itself is cold at its core. You know a section of the north wall where your hand, placed flat against the clay, receives a different cold from the surrounding material, thicker, more deliberate. The moss is thin there. The spring repacking will need to reach it. Most importantly, you know the warmth of 25 other bodies as a resource. You've felt it as a measurable fact. The way the room's temperature rises noticeably when the household is fully assembled versus when half of it is outside. The way the animals' addition changed the equation in ways that Stepan calculated and Nastya refined, and the room ratified by surviving. This is the fact that every peasant in every winter-cold climate understood before anyone thought to write it down. You need the warmth of each other, not as sentiment, as physics. Privacy, the thing your language has no word for, is not just a luxury in this climate. It is a literal death sentence. A person alone in this cold, without the collected warmth of others, without the shared fire that requires shared fuel, that requires shared labour, that requires shared space, does not survive. You're each other's insulation. You're the thing that keeps the other person alive. The communal flaw is not a failure of civilization to provide private spaces. The communal flaw is the achievement of civilization in making the cold survivable at all. March. The sound changes first. You're asleep when you hear it, or your sleeping body hears it and tells your almost sleeping mind, which begins to surface, a different quality in the sounds from outside. The silence of deep winter has its own texture, hard, contained, the silence of things frozen in place. This new silence has a fraction of give, something very slightly softened at its margins. The roof. The snow on the north side, which has been sitting since November like a permanent feature of the building, is settling. Just slightly, just barely. But the settling makes a sound, a faint internal shifting, the sound of the structure accommodating a change in the weight's distribution, and your body registers it before your brain does. Old Jadwiga, who never fully sleeps, who's been in this room for more winters than you can imagine. It's coming. Just that. By the end of March, the river ice makes noise. This is the thing nobody warned you about. Ice doesn't melt in silence. It announces its ending. Cracks run through it at 2 a.m. with sounds like structural failure, like large things that believed in themselves breaking. The sound crosses the 400 paces from the river to the village and enters the izba like a declaration, and every sleeping person in the room shifts, and the children sometimes sit up, and the ice speaks again from a different direction. How long? You ask Prokhor after a particularly loud crack. Week, maybe 10 days, depends on the sun. The sun. You step outside for the morning water, and the sun is different. It's at a different angle, higher, following a track that puts it further up the sky. And it has something in it. Not warmth, exactly. The suggestion of warmth. A quality to its light that the January and February sun didn't have. The sun those months being more presence than function. More light without heat. This sun has heat in it. You stand with the bucket at the well and face east and feel it on your face. Actually feel it. A thinness of warmth that is not substantial but is real. Your skin, which has been under wool since October, receives it with the attention you give to rare things. You stand there longer than you need to. Are you going to stand there all morning? Oksana, the 10-year-old, asks from the doorway, with the judgment of someone who is neither cold nor in possession of a bucket. A minute, you say. Fine, she says, and goes back inside. You stand for another minute. The sun. The day the river opens, the whole village comes out without being called. You hear it from inside, the ice speaking differently, not the structural crack of deep winter, but something more continuous, more liquid. And then Prokhor is already at the door and Stepan is behind him, and Nastya, who follows no one, is somehow also moving toward the door. The bank. Children from 3 households before you arrive. Oksana throwing sticks at the moving ice. Makita being physically prevented from approaching the water's edge by an increasingly irritated Serhiy. The river is grey and fast and loud. The ice moves in sheets and chunks, jostling, some pieces upending to show their flat white undersides before going under. The sound is a compound of grinding, crashing, the deep occasional crack of a large piece meeting an obstacle, the constant rush of water doing what water does when you finally let it, moving, going where it goes. You stand at the bank. 5 months, Prokhor says. Almost 6. 6? The river runs south. Down there, somewhere below the horizon, connected to where you are by water, is Kyiv, is everything that isn't this village, the world. The world has been down there this whole time, and now the path to it is open again, and you feel not exactly eager to go, something more complicated. The relief of an opening combined with the recognition that the closed place had become, over 6 months, genuinely yours. Old Jadwiga is at the bank. Nastya brought her, partly carried her, her arm around the old woman's, negotiating the uneven frozen ground. She stands watching the river with an expression that is older than anything you know how to read. How many times, you ask her. She considers this properly. More than 60, she says. 65, maybe, every year. Is it the same, every year? She looks at you. No, she says. Always different. Always the same. Summer. You work in the fields. The same fields you saw frozen in November, which are in June an entirely different proposition. Broad and warm and full of work that uses your body differently from winter work. The leather scraping is shoulder and wrist work, internal and precise. Field work is full body work, large and repetitive and oriented toward open sky. You're good at both now. Autumn. The harvest. The harvest is better this year than last. Nastya's calculation comes out with reserve to spare. The headman's pooled grain, the measure voted through at the November Vesh, is not needed. It sits in storage as what it was always meant to be, insurance. October. The animals come inside again. The floor reorganises. The goats take their corner. The pig takes the warm corner. The chickens are already on their shelf. And you take your position. You're 6 feet closer to the petch than the day you arrived. 6 feet. 1.5 feet per year of residence, earned through fire tending and water carrying and good draw knife angle, and 3 a.m. conversations and the accumulated demonstration that you are here, that you intend to remain, that you're not a cost that should be minimized but a thing that the household is beginning to understand it needs. Darina's daughter, born in June, a girl, small and very present in her opinions, sleeps on the Polati now. 27 people in the house this winter, 27 sets of warmth, and at the cold end, Levko. 13 years old, from a village east of here, his parents gone, his connection to Stepan a debt that predates you. He arrived in August and spent September with the look you remember. The izba too much, the people too many, the cold end too far from the fire. You show him the fire tending. The trick is the angle, you tell him. What angle? You'll learn it. Clockwise, light pressure. You're looking for the embers to brighten, not for sparks. He tries. Wrong at first, then better. Better, you tell him, because accurate incremental acknowledgement is the only way through. He sleeps at the cold end. Those 4 feet between you and him are his to earn. You know this without having to say it. On quiet evenings, When the work is done and the meal is finished and old Jadwiga has told her story or has chosen not to, you sit near your position on the floor and watch the room do what the room does. The petch breathes. Its warmth comes in pulses you can feel now the way you feel your own pulse. Automatic, registered, but not attended to. Background. Nastya is mending something near the lamp. A tallow lamp. One of 3 that the household lights in the evenings, conservatively, the tallow rationed like everything else. Her hands move in the small circle of light with the complete efficiency of someone for whom mending is what breathing is. Not a task, a mode of being. Darina is half asleep with the baby on her chest. Mikola's arm is behind her. The 3 of them one warm organism. Prokhor is carving. A small wooden thing. Something for the girl at the village's end, whose name Stepan has now, in the Stepan way, begun not saying. Not wedding, but not wedding. The progression. At the cold end, Levko sleeps already. The sleep of a 13-year-old who carried the water bucket twice today, because you showed him the technique for the ice path and he went back a second time to confirm he had it. You watch him sleep and you think, this is how it moves. This is the specific mechanism by which knowledge travels in a world without writing. From hands to hands, from proximity, from 7 months of watching before you're allowed to do, from the 3 a.m. language that exists only in the dark. You didn't teach Levko because you were assigned to. You taught him because you were there, because you knew, because knowing and being present is the same as teaching in a world where presence is the only available medium. This is not a system anyone designed. This is what happens when people share a floor. Here's the lesson that takes until the second winter to understand completely, and that you understand not through any specific moment, but through the gradual accumulation of living in this specific place with these specific people. You came here with nothing. You were placed at the cold end. You were given no welcome, no warmth that wasn't directly tied to demonstrated worth. And the floor taught you, incrementally, foot by foot, to earn your place in it. But here is the thing the floor teaches that you didn't expect. The earning is not the humiliation. The earning is the content. The earning is how you become part of something rather than adjacent to it. Privacy, the concept your language never named because the concept was incompatible with survival, turns out to be something you can live without more completely than you could have imagined. And what you live with instead is not a lesser thing, not a consolation for the absence of something better. What you live with instead is the knowledge of 26 other specific people, down to their breathing patterns and their baseline moods, and the specific quality of their fear at 3 a.m, and the particular way each one of them demonstrates care without naming it as care. Nestya, tending the fire when you were sick without mentioning it. Old Jadwiga, sitting with the birch bark tea, saying your mother made this tea right. Prokhor, you'll be fine, in the night language that doesn't survive. Daylight. Stepan, a nod across the shop when you did the negotiation right. A nod that means, you're here. You're real. You belong. You didn't choose any of this. You arrived and the floor was the floor, and the hierarchy was the hierarchy, and the cold end was the cold end. But over the course of a year, and then another year, and then the years beyond that you can already see the shape of, this floor is yours. Not only yours, not in any private sense, yours in the sense that it knows you and you know it, that your position in it is inscribed in its geography, that the people on it know you're breathing in the dark and you know theirs. That is, it turns out enough. That is, in the specific mathematics of survival and community and the long dark of northern winter, more than enough. There is a night in late December, the longest night, the night when darkness reaches its full extent and then, theoretically, begins to retreat. When the village does something that Father Pavlo doesn't ask about. Not because he doesn't know. He knows. He's been making his circuit for 15 years through villages where Christianity is the official religion, and the older understanding of the world is the actual one. And he has made a calculation that many priests in this era make, that the surface of things matters more than the depth, and that people who come to Mass on Sunday and celebrate Kolyada on the solstice are better than people who do neither, and that the God he serves is large enough to contain both. Or perhaps he genuinely believes it, or perhaps he doesn't think about it, being practical. Priests in 1066 are human beings with complicated inner lives that the historical record does not preserve. The night is the night before the solstice, or the night of it. The calculation is not exact in the way modern calendars are exact. It's felt, not measured, determined by the quality of the dark and the position of the stars in Old Jadwiga. Who knows? Old Jadwiga always knows. Tomorrow night, she says, the day before, and doesn't elaborate, and nobody asks. The preparation is embedded in the normal day's work in a way that makes it hard to see unless you know what you're looking at. Nastya makes something different. Not kasha, not the usual winter food, but a specific grain preparation with honey and dried fruit and poppy seeds, thick and sweet-smelling, that gets set aside in a clay vessel and covered with a cloth. Oksana Stasha does something with the threshold of the door that involves water and a gesture she makes quickly, with the downward glance of someone doing something automatic that they'd rather not have to explain. The children know without being told that something is happening. Children always know. They track the emotional weather of adults with the accuracy of small animals tracking actual weather. That evening, after the regular meal, Stepan moves the lamp to the centre of the room rather than near the wall. This is different. The lamp at the centre, everyone gathered around it rather than on their edges, the room reorganising its geometry slightly, the sleeping positions and work positions all shifting toward the lamp's light. The usual evening, half the household doing various tasks, half already drifting towards sleep, doesn't happen. Instead, everyone is present. Even Prokhor, who often slips out to Mikita Chorny's in the evenings, is here. Even Fedir, who has the habit of falling asleep before the last story, is awake. Old Jadwiga gets down from her bench. This is unusual enough that it produces a ripple of attention. She stands, with Nastya's help, and walks to the centre of the room. She moves like someone who is doing something her body has done many times, and that her body still knows how to do even when her legs have opinions about the general project of walking. She takes the clay vessel of the special food. She speaks. Her voice is different. Not louder, she never speaks loudly, but lower, and with a rhythm to it that isn't her ordinary rhythm, a cadence, something that is not quite song and not quite speech. You don't understand all of it. The language she's using is older than the language you speak, older than the language Nastya speaks, or Stepan. It's the language that the old understanding lived in, before the new understanding arrived from Kiev via the decision of a prince who was also making a political calculation. Some of the words you recognize: Zemlya, earth, Vohon, fire, Shitya, life. She's not praying to Christ. That much is clear. She's addressing something older, The fire, maybe. The earth. The specific old powers that governed winter and sun and seed and return. Around the room, everyone listening with the quality of people who know the words, or who knew them once, or whose parents knew them. Even Stepan, who goes to Spas and crosses himself with the correct sincerity of a man who believes the new thing, while having grown up in a house where the old thing was still spoken. The solstice night, the longest dark, the prayer that asks the sun to return, the acknowledgement that the fire in the petch is keeping you alive, and that the fire deserves to be spoken to directly, without intermediary. Old Jadwiga finishes. She returns to her bench with Nastya's arm. The special food is distributed, a small portion each, sweet and dense, tasting of honey and winter and something that has been in the recipe for generations before writing existed. You eat it, and you don't know what it is exactly. Not its name, not its theology, not whether it belongs to the old religion, or has been absorbed into the new one's calendar, or whether the distinction matters. But you know what it does. It makes the room feel like the centre of something. Like the lamplight at the room's centre is not just a lamp, but a point around which something larger is organised. You'll remember this more clearly than most of the winter. Not the words, the feeling. The feeling of being inside something ancient, with ancient people, in a room that is ancient itself, doing the thing that has been done in rooms like this for as long as rooms like this have existed. The asking for the sun to return, the acknowledgement of the fire's necessity, the sweet heavy food and the low-burning lamp and 26 people breathing in the longest night of the year. In the morning, old Jadwiga is back on her bench. Nobody mentions the night before. Father Pavlo, when he visits in January, does not ask. Her name is Halia. You know this from context, from the times it's been spoken in the 3 a.m. language, from the way Prokhor says it when he's not guarding his mouth. Halia Petrenko, the second daughter of the Petrenko household at the village's north end. She's 16. She's been at this village for her whole life. So she and Prokhor have known each other since childhood in the casual, total way that people know each other when their households are 200 meters apart and the village has no other children their age. The knowing each other shifted into something different about a year before you arrived. You piece this together gradually from small things. The way Prokhor's mood changes on the days when some household task takes him to the north end of the village, the quality of his attention when Halia's family is mentioned in conversation, the fact that he told you her name in the dark in December, even though you hadn't asked. "She's good with the loom," he said at 3 a.m, as if this were relevant information. "That's useful," you said. "She's quick. She learns things faster than you'd expect." That's also useful. A pause. The fire breathing. 24 people sleeping. "I don't know what Stepan's thinking," he said. "Not to you, to the dark." "I think Stepan's thinking he's watching," you said. "Not deciding yet." Another pause. "You think so?" He mentioned the Petrenko household twice at the Vesh. Not about the grain, just mentioned it. Twice. Prokhor was quiet for a while. "You pay too much attention," he said. "It's February. There's not much else to do." He made a sound that was almost a laugh. After that, the subject of Halia came up 4 more times in the 3 a.m. language, in the careful circling way that people approach things that matter when they're not entirely sure they have permission to want them. You listen. You say the minimum that keeps the conversation going without steering it anywhere Prokhor hasn't decided to go. This is a skill. The skill of being present without being a direction. In February, Stepan and Fedya Petrenko have a conversation that lasts 40 minutes, conducted in the low, practical tones of men settling something. You're at the draw knife when it happens, and you're close enough to hear the rhythm of the conversation without most of the content. You hear Zibiroki, the word for the marriage gifts. You hear the name of the Petrenko household twice. You catch Prokhor's eye across the room. He makes a face. That is 17 years old and trying very hard to be 25. You look back at the hide and keep scraping. That evening, Stepan doesn't announce anything. He eats his meal and is slightly more expansive than usual, slightly more present in the room, his attention slightly warmer. Nastya serves the meal, and her movements have the specific extra care of someone who is making a small occasion out of an ordinary dinner without naming it as such. No announcement. But later, when you're nearly asleep, Prokhor says, "Next autumn." "Good," you say. "She'll sleep." He stops, recalculates the floor's geography. "The floor's going to need adjusting." "We'll figure it out," you say. A long silence. "Yeah," he says, and something in his voice that you don't try to name because naming it would be in daylight language, and this is the other language. You sleep. It happens in June, which is better than it could have been. Winter births, and winter births happen, you've heard about them, the specific challenge of managing a birth in a closed house with 26 witnesses and no possibility of sending for help across a frozen river. Winter births are a different proposition from summer ones. In June, the door can be open. The banya can serve its secondary purpose, which most households use it for. The labouring room, the room for birth, the one genuinely private space available for the most genuinely private thing. Nastya takes charge. This is not discussed. This is simply the fact of the matter. Oksana Stasha takes charge alongside her, because Oksana Stasha has had 2 children and Nastya has had 4, and between them they've accumulated the specific knowledge that exists in women who have managed this before. Darina goes into the banya in the late morning. You are in the field, which is where all the men and older children are sent, because this is not male territory and there is no ambiguity about that. The men work in the field, and they know what is happening in the banya and they don't talk about it. Stepan hoes a row of something with the focused attention of a man performing a productive task rather than waiting. Mykola is 3 rows over, working with a speed that has very little to do with how quickly the field actually needs to be worked. You hoe your own row. The soil is warm now, actually warm, June soil in the sun, with the smell of green things and the physical reality of summer, which is completely different from the physical reality of winter, in ways that you've had to relearn your body for every May. Summer Boris has different muscles than winter Boris. Summer smells, summer light, summer movement, all different. The day passes. Late afternoon. Nastya comes to the field's edge. She doesn't say anything immediately. She looks at Mykola. Mykola goes very still. "Come," she says. He goes. You find out later from Oksana, the 10-year-old, who finds everything out and distributes it without prejudice, that the baby came in the afternoon, that it was a difficult afternoon, that old Jadwiga was in the banya too, and that old Jadwiga knew things that Nastya acknowledged she didn't know. You find out that the baby is a girl, which you already knew from the weight of the afternoon, from Mykola's face when he came back from the banya, from the particular quality of the izba's atmosphere at supper. Her name, chosen quickly, the way names were chosen in a time when the choosing needed to happen before anything intervened, is Vera. Faith. The first night Vera is in the house, in Darina's arms, on the floor. The floor. The communal floor where she will spend her winters for the next several years. The room's atmosphere changes. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone would articulate. But a small person who didn't exist yesterday is here today, breathing the particular breath of the newly arrived, taking in this air, the smoke, the animals, the compound smell, as the first air she's ever breathed. This house, this floor, this oven, the first thing she knows. Old Jadwiga sits on her bench and looks at the baby with the expression she has for things she's seen many times and hasn't gotten tired of. Good, she says, just that. You're 17 now, nearly 18, and something has shifted in how the banya Saturday falls. You go in the second group still, men and older boys, but your position within the group is different. Not first, not last. The middle position that belongs to someone who has been here long enough to have a position. Stepan in the banya talks to you. This is new. Not the 3 a.m. language, not the dark, unwitnessed talk of fire tending. This is daylight language, which means it counts in a different way, means it's spoken with the understanding that it exists beyond the moment. He talks about the Petrenko household and the autumn arrangement for Prokhor, about the north wall, which will need a proper repair in spring, not just the emergency moss packing you did in November, about the spring trading trip which Prokhor will take for the first time rather than Mykola, because Mykola now has Darina and Vera. And then, with the casual directness of a man who has decided to say something and is going to say it without construction, next winter you'll be further north. He pours the ladle. Steam. Yes, sir. Prokhor's wife will need room. You've been doing the work. You've earned the room. Nothing more. He pours the ladle again. You sit in the heat and feel it on your face. Stepan is not a man who says things he doesn't mean, and he's not a man who means things he doesn't say. The sentence he said is the full content of what he means. No subtext, no elaboration. Just, you've been doing the work. You've earned the room. This is praise in the specific form that this world produces it. Not warmth. Stepan is not warm, not sentiment, just the acknowledgement of fact, which in this world is the highest form of recognition available. You've been doing the work. You've earned the room. Outside, November. The river closed. The long dark beginning. Inside, the banya's heat. Stepan's factual acknowledgement. And something in your chest that is the specific feeling of a door opening. Not a dramatic door. Not a door to anywhere grand. Just the door to the next position on the floor. The next 6 feet north. The next increment of belonging in the place you didn't choose and couldn't leave, and that has become, by the simplest and most thorough of methods, by living in it, completely with no alternative, yours, late January, second winter, a night when the cold is significant enough to make the house conscious of itself. You're tending the fire at the small hours, the house breathing, the usual sounds. Old Jadwiga speaks. She does this sometimes, not often, not predictably. Speaks into the fire-tending silence with something that isn't exactly directed at you, but isn't exactly not directed at you. You're going to stay, she says. It's not a question. Yes, you say. Not everyone does. I know. She's quiet for a moment. The fire talking to itself. Your mother, she says, and stops. You wait. She would have stayed too, old Jadwiga says. That kind of person. You can tell from how they make the tea. Some people make it thinking about the next thing. Some people make it thinking about the tea. She was the second kind. You hold the breathing stick and you don't say anything because there's nothing to say that wouldn't be smaller than what she said. People who think about the tea, old Jadwiga says, they stay where they are. They make what's in front of them right. They don't need somewhere else. The fire breathes. Is that good? You ask. You're not sure why you ask it. It's what it is, old Jadwiga says. It's what survives the winter. She closes her eyes. Not sleep. She doesn't sleep. Not fully. Not that you've ever seen. But a withdrawal. A turning inward. You sit with the fire until it's settled, and then you go back to your blanket. You lie down and stare at the ceiling that's too dark to see, and you think about the tea. Your mother, making birch bark tea, thinking about the tea. Old Jadwiga, sitting in this house for how many winters, watching generations of household members tend the fire, watching the children grow on the palati and come down as young people and eventually leave or stay, watching the floor rearrange itself around births and deaths and marriages and arrivals. Watching, paying the attention that is her form of presence. You're going to stay, she said. Yes. The second spring. The river speaks for 3 days before it opens. The ice cracks and the cracks run, and the sound comes through the walls at night, and the children sit up and the ice keeps talking. On the morning it opens, old Jadwiga says, "Today, you go to the bank, and this is what is different this year from last year. Last year at the bank you were still cataloguing, still absorbing. The river opening was something you were watching happen to the village. This year the river opening is happening to you. You feel the sound of it differently. The grey-brown water moving south, the ice sheets jostling and grinding, the enormous winter force of it releasing. You feel it in your chest. Not sentiment, something more physical. The specific resonance of a place that is yours with an event that has been happening to that place for as long as the place has existed. Prokhor stands beside you. Mikola with Darina. The baby on Darina's back in the cloth wrap. The baby taken in the first river opening of her life with the total absorption of someone for whom everything is still the first. Stepan is slightly back from the bank, the way he usually stands, present but not committing his weight to the moment until he knows what the moment requires. Old Jadwiga on Nastya's arm. The river. How many times, you ask old Jadwiga again. The question you asked last year. She looks at you. Now 66, she says. Is it? Always different, she says. Always the same. And there's something in her voice that's different this time from last time. Something that might be amusement. Might be the recognition that you asked the same question 2 years in a row, which is either obliviousness or some form of ritual. Next year, you say, I'll ask again. Her expression. Not a smile. Old Jadwiga's face doesn't arrange itself into smiles as such, but something adjacent, something in the territory of good. The years in a place like this are different from years elsewhere. Not faster or slower exactly, more embedded. Each year acquires the texture of the one before, the sediment of small events, the particular fever that ran through the household, the winter when the goat got into the grain, the summer when Prokhor's marriage happened, and Halia moved into the izba, and the floor reorganized for the last time that you'll see. Prokhor now 8 feet north of you, his wife beside him, the floor changed, each year's events becoming part of the structure you carry forward. You are 18, then 19. At 19 you take the spring trading trip. Not alone. Stepan comes with you, because Stepan comes with you the first time to show you how. The same way the draw knife was shown and the fire was shown, and everything important in this world is shown by the person who already knows to the person who needs to know. The trading post is 3 days south by river. It's not Kyiv, it's a smaller settlement, a market by a confluence of rivers, with a few permanent structures and a seasonal chaos of boats and merchants and goods from places you've never been. You see, for the first time in your life, salt, not the pinch and measure of the clay pot at home, carefully rationed by Nastya's hand. Salt in quantity, a barrel of it, grey-white, with a smell that is both mineral and specific, the smell of the sea that you have also never seen. You see silk. You touch it. A merchant lets you touch a small piece, demonstrating, and it's so different from everything your hands know that your brain takes a moment to categorize it as cloth at all. Too smooth, too light. Something wrong about it in the tactile sense. Wrong meaning unfamiliar. Wrong meaning not this. You see a man from somewhere east, far east, far enough that his face looks different from anyone you know, his language completely unrecognizable, selling small bronze objects that might be religious or might be decorative or might be both. And you wonder, for the first time, with the specific wonder of a person who has never had to wonder about it before, what the world looks like from where he came from. How many floors are there, in how many languages, with how many people breathing around how many clay ovens. You buy salt, a small quantity of iron for tools, some dye for cloth that Nastya specified exactly, in a colour she described with a precision suggesting she'd been thinking about it all winter. You trade, worked leather from your hands, from the draw knife, from the months. The quality of the leather speaks, Stepan says. Leather well prepared tells the buyer something about the household that made it. You negotiate twice. Stepan watches. He doesn't speak. On the boat home, he says, the salt price was correct. The iron, you paid 2 measures too many. I know, you say. I knew when I agreed to it. Why did you agree? The man had a daughter about Oksana's age with him. She was hungry. 2 extra measures wasn't nothing, but it wasn't the household. Long pause. The river moving past. The spring trees green on both banks. That's not how trade works, Stepan says. I know. Another pause. It's how it works sometimes, Stepan says, and says nothing else and watches the river. You're 20 now. The floor is different. Halya is in it. Vera is on the Pilati, 3 years old, with a personality that takes up significantly more space than she does physically. There are 2 other changes. Serhiy, Oksana Stasha's son, has left, not unhappily, with an arrangement for work in a larger settlement to the south, which is considered a reasonable outcome, and Levko has been here 2 years and has moved 4 feet north of the cold end, earning them in the way things are earned in this house, without ceremony, without explicit acknowledgement, through the patient accumulation of demonstrated presence. You're in the position Prokhor occupied when you arrived. Not literally, Prokhor is further north now with his wife, but structurally. You're the person on this floor who has been here long enough to not be new and not long enough to be fully settled, and who therefore occupies the specific middle position of someone in the process of arriving. Not arrived, in the process of arriving. You've come to understand that this is not a temporary state. The process of arriving never fully ends. The floor keeps reorganizing, the household keeps changing. There's always something more to earn. Always another foot north, always another year of demonstrated presence between where you are and where you're going. This is not a depressing realization. It's the opposite. It means you're still part of the movement, still becoming part of. The thing hasn't ended and turned to static. The floor is still alive under you. On this evening specifically, Nastya serves the supper, mushroom broth tonight, with a piece of salt pork that has been in the stores since November and is at exactly the right point of cure, rich and specific, tasting of the months it's been waiting. The room responds to the smell with the involuntary upward shift of mood that meat produces. Even Levko, at the cold end, Levko, who is still calibrating his responses to the household, lifts his head slightly. Old Jadwiga is served first, as she is served first now, her age having moved her to the head of the meal order in a way that her bench position has always implied, but that Nastya has only recently made explicit. The old woman eats slowly, with the deliberate attention of someone who has decided that eating is worth doing well. Prokhor and Halia sit together in the way that married people sit, which is to say, not demonstrating anything, not performing, just existing in the natural adjacency of people whose bodies have organized around each other. This is how you know a marriage is settled, not by any declaration, but by the specific ordinary ease of adjacency. After supper, old Jadwiga doesn't tell a story tonight. She looks at you. You, she says. The room's attention shifts, barely, almost imperceptibly, the way the room's attention shifts when something unusual happens. Me, you say, tell something. She has never asked this before. You've been here 2.5 years, and she has never turned the storytelling over to anyone else. You look at Nastya, who is not looking at you, which means she's listening, at Prokhor, who is, at Stepan, who has the expression he has when he's waiting to see what happens next. You think, when I came here, you say, I didn't know the difference between the smell of the fire when it needs feeding and the smell of the fire when it's fine. I know now. The room is quiet, listening. When I came here, I couldn't walk across the sleeping floor without waking someone. Now I can do it without thinking. More quiet. When I came here, you say, I didn't know what it felt like to be part of something. I know now. Old Jadwiga looks at you for a long moment. Good, she says. Just that. The same word she said the first night you tended the fire and got it right. You've been hearing it for 2.5 years. It has never gotten smaller. One more night, the last night before spring, which you don't know is the last night before spring, but which old Jadwiga knows. She said this morning from her bench the single word that means it, the same word she says every year, the word you've learned to hear now like the sound of the ice cracking, like the specific change in the petch when the wood is good. She'll be right. She's always right. Tonight, you lie in your position on the floor, 10 feet north of where you started, 10 feet north. 2.5 years of earned warmth, incremental, foot by foot, each foot costing something specific. Winter nights and early mornings and draw knife work and the spring trading trip and the 3 a.m. language and the times when Nastya's fire doing when you were sick had to be paid back in some form that wasn't payment. That was just the continuation of being present. The petch breathes. 28 people breathe. Vera on the palati making the small sounds of 3-year-old sleep, which are specific and charming, and which wake Darina at intervals without waking anyone else. Darina having calibrated herself to those sounds with the precision of a mother. Halia's breathing, new to you, only one winter of familiarity, still not entirely mapped. She breathes slightly faster than most of the household. You don't know if this is her or if it's the pregnancy that Nastya announced 2 weeks ago in the Nastya way, which is to adjust the food allocation without comment, and to move Halya's position slightly north without explanation, and for the household to understand and to not say so. Another year, another person arriving, the floor keeps moving. The warmth keeps being earned and shared and redistributed. This is the mechanism. This is how it works. You lie in your position and you feel the house around you. Its log walls, its clay-packed joints, its 2 tons of pitch at the northern end, its smell that is all the winters in its structure coming back out to meet you, its 28 humans doing the deep nightly work of repair and consolidation. You feel, specifically, the floor. The floor is not soft. It never has been and it never will be. It's compressed clay, smooth from years of foot traffic, with a specific, smooth, hard quality of things that have been worked to their final form. It doesn't give under you. It accepts you exactly as you are and offers what it can, which is a surface stable and present, the same every night. 10 feet north, the warmth of it, the cold you started from and the warmth you've travelled toward and the distance still remaining, which is not a disappointment, but a direction. Let the thoughts go, one by one, the way the fire lets go of its wood once the burning is done. The spring trading trip, let it go. The autumn harvest, let it go. Levko, at the cold end, earning his feet, let it go. Halya slightly faster than average breathing, let it go. Old Jadwiga on her bench, watching, the pitch glow in her eyes. Let her watch. Let the sounds become background. Let the background become the one sound, the one that has been here all night and all winter and all your winters, the breathing. The breathing of 28 people who didn't choose each other and can't leave each other, and have, over time, become something that isn't exactly family and isn't exactly anything else. That is specifically the thing you are when you've shared a floor long enough. In the morning, the river. In the morning, old Jadwiga's word, and then the village at the bank, and then the ice speaking its last words and letting the water go. In the morning, spring, but that's in the morning. Right now, the warmth of the pesh, which has been burning since October and will burn until April, and which converts birch into heat with a patience that has no opinion about time, that simply does what it does for as long as it's asked. The warmth of the bodies around you, 28 small furnaces, each one generating the heat of their own specific life, all of it combining in this room into something that is greater than any individual contribution. This is the physics of the communal floor. This is what makes it survivable. This is what makes it home. Let me tell you something about the floor you're on right now. Whether it's a bed, a couch, a chair, the specific configuration of pillows and blankets you've worked out for yourself over the years. It's yours. It has your shape in it. It knows your weight and your preferences and the specific arrangement that lets you sleep. You are, in the most direct sense, doing what Boris was doing on his floor in Stoyani in 1067, lying in the place that is yours, in the dark, surrounded by whatever your version of 28 people is. Maybe it's a city of thousands around. You, their warmth reaching you through walls and floors, their sounds muffled to a constant ambient presence that means people. That means alive. Maybe it's one other person breathing next to you, the specific breathing you know by heart, the baseline you've learned to read the way Boris learned to read the pitch. Maybe it's just you and the sounds of the building settling, the ambient warmth of the structure around you. the accumulated presence of all the people who've been in this space before you. The floor holds you. It has always held you. It was holding people 1,000 years before you, and it will hold people 1,000 years after, and the essential transaction, body, rest, darkness, warmth, the turning inward, has not changed in any of those years and will not change. Some things don't change. The need to lie down at the end of a long day, the need for the day to be over, the need for the sounds around you to become background, for the background to become silence, for the silence to become sleep. These don't change. The body that is tired at the end of the day, Boris's body, tired from carrying water and scraping hides and tending fires and navigating the social geography of a floor, is your body, tired from whatever your day was, whatever you carried. You've earned rest, the same way he earned it, incrementally, foot by foot, through the daily demonstration of being present and useful and here. You're warm enough. Let that be the sentence for right now, not the comparison, not as warm as the Paleti, not as warm as the position nearest the Petch, just warm enough. The warmth that is yours, the warmth that the blanket holds, and the building holds, and the whatever is around you holds. Warm enough, fed enough, the grain stores calculated, the body fueled for the night's work of repair. Safe enough, the wall solid, the roof holding the cold outside where it belongs. Let the body do what it knows how to do. Let the hands unclench, if they've been clenched. Let the shoulder that has been carrying something set it down, just for the hours of darkness. Let the breathing slow, not forced, not counted, just allowed to find its own pace, which is slower than you think, deeper than the day requires. The sounds around you, whatever they are, let them become background. The city or the building or the single other person or the specific sounds of wherever you are, let them become the same as the peaches breathing, the same as 28 people in one room, the same as the sound of being alive in a world full of other people who are also alive. Not quiet, not silence. Something better. The sound of everything continuing, of the world going on, of you not being required to manage any of it for the next several hours. Let it continue without you. Let yourself fall below it, into the particular depth where the sounds become texture rather than information, where the warmth becomes presence rather than temperature, where the thoughts become images and the images become less precise and less precise, until they are not thought at all, but only the soft electrical quiet of a brain doing its restorative work. You've carried today completely. You can let it go now. It's over. It was enough. Whatever it was enough, and it's done. And the only task left is the simplest one. Be still. Be here. Let the darkness hold you the way the floor held Boris, the way the floor holds everyone who has ever lain down at the end of a day and surrendered to the basic mercy of sleep. Let it come. It's coming. The warmth is already there. The quiet is already there. You're already most of the way down. Let the last of it go. The last thought. The last resistance. The last small grip on the day that is over. Let it go. Good night.